The afternoon sun beat down on the parking lot of Miller's grocery store in the small town of Pinewood, North Carolina. Sarah Mitchell pushed her shopping cart toward her old blue sedan, her mind on the dinner she planned to cook that evening. At 62 years old, Sarah had seen a lot in her life, but nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to witness. Sarah had moved to Pinewood 3 years ago, after her husband passed away from cancer. The quiet town suited her. People were friendly but minded their own business. She'd made a few friends at the local church and volunteered at the food bank on Thursdays. Life was simple and peaceful, just the way she wanted it after raising 3 children and spending 30 years as a nurse. As she loaded her groceries into the trunk, Sarah heard raised voices coming from the far end of the parking lot. She looked up and saw a man and woman standing beside a silver SUV. The man was tall and heavyset, his face red with anger. The woman was smaller, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She had her hands raised in a defensive gesture, trying to calm him down. Sarah hesitated. She'd been raised to mind her own business, but something about the scene made her uneasy. The woman's body language spoke of fear. Sarah had seen that posture before, during her years working in the emergency room. She recognized the signs of someone who'd been hurt before and was terrified it would happen again. The man's voice grew louder. "You think you can embarrass me like that, in front of everyone?" "Please, Kevin, I didn't mean anything by it," the woman said, her voice shaking. "I was just talking to the cashier." "You were flirting with him. Don't lie to me." Sarah felt her heart rate increase. She glanced around the parking lot, hoping to see someone else, someone who might intervene. But the lot was nearly empty. Most of Pinewood's residents did their shopping in the morning to avoid the afternoon heat. She pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over the keypad. Should she call the police? But what would she tell them? A couple was arguing. That happened every day. Yet every instinct she had, honed from decades of caring for people, told her this was different. Before she could make a decision, the man grabbed the woman's arm roughly and shook her. "Get in the car, now." "You're hurting me," the woman whimpered. That was enough for Sarah. She pressed 911, but before the call could connect, the man shoved the woman hard against the SUV. Her head hit the metal with a sickening thud. "Hey," Sarah shouted before she could stop herself. "Leave her alone." The man's head snapped toward her. His eyes were cold and dark. "Mind your own business, old lady." Sarah's hands trembled, but she stood her ground. "I'm calling the police." The man laughed, a harsh sound that sent chills down Sarah's spine. "You do that. By the time they get here, we'll be long gone, and my wife will tell them everything's just fine. Won't you, Rachel?" The woman named Rachel looked at Sarah with desperate, pleading eyes, but she nodded slowly. "Everything's fine," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. Sarah felt helpless. She knew what was happening here. She'd seen it in the ER more times than she could count. Women with broken bones, black eyes, and carefully constructed stories about falling down stairs or walking into doors. Women, too, afraid to tell the truth because they knew the consequences would be even worse. The man grabbed Rachel's arm again and started to pull her toward the driver's side of the SUV. Rachel stumbled, trying to keep up with his angry pace. He raised his hand as if to strike her. That's when Sarah heard the sound of footsteps running across the pavement. She turned and saw a man jogging toward them with a large German shepherd on a leash beside him. The dog's ears were perked forward, alert and focused. The man was in his late 30s, tall and fit, with short brown hair and intense blue eyes. He wore a simple gray t-shirt and jeans, but something about the way he moved suggested military training. The dog kept perfect pace with him, disciplined and controlled. "Everything okay here?" the man asked as he approached. His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable authority. Kevin, the angry husband, dropped Rachel's arm and turned to face the newcomer. "Nothing to do with you, buddy. Family matter." "Didn't look like a family matter to me," the man said evenly. Looked like you were about to hit this woman. She's my wife. I can talk to her however I want. The man with the German shepherd stepped closer. The dog, sensing tension, shifted its weight forward slightly, its dark eyes fixed on Kevin. Actually, you can't. Assault is assault, whether you're married or not. Sarah watched the confrontation unfold, her phone still in her hand. She noticed other details about the stranger now. The way he positioned himself between Kevin and Rachel, the protective stance, the complete lack of fear in his eyes despite Kevin's size advantage. Kevin puffed up his chest, trying to look intimidating. You want to be a hero. You think you and your dog scare me. I'm not trying to scare you, the man replied. I'm trying to give you a chance to walk away before you do something you'll really regret. Is that a threat? The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. No, it's a promise. For a moment, the parking lot was silent except for the distant sound of traffic on the main road. Sarah held her breath, wondering what would happen next. Kevin looked at the stranger, then at the German shepherd, then back at the stranger. Something in the man's eyes must have convinced him that pushing further would be a mistake. This isn't over, Kevin snarled at Rachel. Then he turned and walked to his truck, which was parked 2 spaces away. He climbed in, started the engine, and peeled out of the parking lot with a screech of tires. Rachel stood frozen against the SUV, her whole body shaking. Tears streamed down her face. The stranger's demeanor changed immediately. The hardness left his eyes, replaced by gentle concern. Are you hurt? He asked Rachel softly. Rachel shook her head, but Sarah could see the red mark on her forehead where it had struck the car. I'm fine, she whispered. You're not fine, the man said gently. Let me call an ambulance. No, Rachel said quickly, panic filling her voice. No ambulance, no police, please. It'll only make things worse. The man looked at Rachel with such profound sadness that Sarah felt tears prick her own eyes. He knew, just as Sarah knew, that Rachel would go back to Kevin, that she would endure more abuse, that the cycle would continue. Sarah stepped forward. I'm a nurse, she said. Retired, but I can look at that bump on your head if you'll let me. Rachel looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. You don't understand. Kevin gets. He gets upset sometimes, but he loves me. He just has a temper. A temper that makes him put his hands on you, the stranger said quietly. That's not love. You don't know him, Rachel protested weakly. I know his type, the man said. I've seen it before. Sarah pulled a business card from her purse and handed it to Rachel. It had her name and phone number on it. I volunteer at St. Mary's Church on Oak Street. If you ever need help or just someone to talk to, you can call me, day or night. Rachel took the card with trembling fingers and tucked it into her pocket. Thank you, but I'll be fine. I need to go. At least let me drive you home, the stranger offered. You shouldn't be alone right now. No, Rachel said firmly. Kevin will be expecting me. If I'm late, he'll... She trailed off, realizing what she'd almost revealed. The man and Sarah exchanged glances. They both understood what Rachel had left unsaid. Rachel got into her SUV and drove away. Sarah and the stranger stood in the parking lot, watching her go, both feeling the weight of helplessness. I'm Sarah Mitchell, she said, extending her hand. The man shook it. His grip was firm but gentle. Jack Cooper, this is Max. He gestured to the German shepherd who sat obediently at his side. Thank you for stepping in, Sarah said. I didn't know what to do. You were doing exactly the right thing, Jack assured her. Calling attention to it, being a witness, that matters. Sarah looked at Max, who gazed back at her with intelligent brown eyes. He's beautiful. Is he a service dog? Trained working dog, Jack said, reaching down to pat Max's head. We served together overseas. He's retired now like me. Sarah studied Jack's face and saw the telltale signs she'd learned to recognize over the years. The 1,000-yard stare that sometimes crossed his features, the way he constantly scanned their surroundings, the controlled movements of someone always ready for action. Navy SEAL, she guessed. Jack looked surprised. How did you know? My son was in the Marines, Sarah said. I learned to recognize the signs. You carry yourself differently. Jack nodded, a shadow passing over his face. 15 years, got out 2 years ago. And you moved to Pinewood. Seemed like a good place to find some peace and quiet, Jack said with a slight smile. Guess that didn't work out too well today. Sarah looked in the direction Rachel had driven. What do you think will happen to her? Jack's jaw tightened. Nothing good if she stays with him. Men like that don't change, they only get worse. I wish there was more we could do. There might be, Jack said thoughtfully. If she reaches out, you gave her your number, that's important. She knows she has somewhere to turn. Do you think she'll call? Jack was quiet for a moment. Maybe, when things get bad enough, they usually do. Sarah felt a chill despite the warm afternoon air. That's what I'm afraid of. They stood in silence for a moment, two strangers brought together by a violent incident, both wondering about the woman who'd driven away and what fate awaited her. I should let you get back to your groceries, Jack said finally. Don't want your ice cream to melt. Sarah managed a weak smile. Thank you again, Jack, for being brave enough to step in. You were brave too, Jack said. Don't discount that. As Jack walked away with Max at his side, Sarah finished loading her groceries into her car. But as she drove home, she couldn't stop thinking about Rachel's terrified eyes and Kevin's cruel smile. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. 3 weeks passed with no word from Rachel. Sarah thought about her every day, wondering if she was safe, if things had gotten worse. She asked around town discreetly, trying to learn more about Kevin and Rachel without drawing too much attention. What she discovered troubled her deeply. Kevin Bradshaw worked at the auto body shop on the edge of town. He'd lived in Pinewood his whole life, came from a well-known family. His father had been the sheriff years ago before retiring. Kevin had that small-town protection, the kind that came from generations of connections and mutual favors. Rachel was an outsider. She'd moved to Pinewood 5 years ago when she married Kevin. She worked part-time at the library and kept to herself mostly. The few people who knew her described her as quiet, sweet, and increasingly withdrawn over the past few years. Sarah saw Jack Cooper around town occasionally. He'd rented a small house on the outskirts of Pinewood, near the woods where he could take Max for long runs. They'd nod to each other in acknowledgement when their paths crossed at the grocery store or the coffee shop, but they didn't speak about that day in the parking lot. Until the night Sarah got the call. It was almost midnight when her phone rang. Sarah had been asleep, and she fumbled for the phone on her nightstand, squinting at the bright screen in the darkness. "Hello," she answered groggily. Heavy breathing on the other end, then a whisper barely audible. "Sarah, this is Rachel from the parking lot." Sarah sat up immediately, suddenly wide awake. "Rachel, are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm at the gas station on Route 7, Rachel said, her voice shaking. "I didn't know who else to call. I found your card in my jacket pocket." "What happened?" "Kevin, he was drinking. We got into a fight about money. Rachel's voice broke. "He hit me, hard, multiple times. I waited until he passed out, then I took his truck keys so he couldn't follow me and I ran." Sarah's heart pounded. "Are you hurt? Do you need an ambulance?" "No ambulance," Rachel said quickly. "But I don't have anywhere to go. My family is in Ohio and I don't have money for a hotel. I couldn't stay there, not tonight." "Listen to me carefully," Sarah said, already getting out of bed and reaching for her clothes. "You did the right thing by leaving. Stay at that gas station. Go inside where there are people and lights. I'm coming to get you." "Thank you," Rachel sobbed. "Thank you so much." Sarah dressed quickly and grabbed her car keys. As she headed for the door, she paused. Rachel might need more help than Sarah could provide alone. Kevin might wake up and come looking for his wife. Sarah needed backup, someone who could handle trouble if it came. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the number Jack Cooper had given her after that day in the parking lot. He'd insisted she take it, saying she should call if she ever saw Rachel again or needed help. Sarah had saved it, not really expecting to use it. She pressed call. The phone rang 3 times before Jack's alert voice answered. Cooper. Jack, this is Sarah Mitchell. I'm sorry to call so late. Sarah, what's wrong? It's Rachel, the woman from the parking lot. She called me. Her husband beat her and she ran. She's at the gas station on Route 7. I'm going to pick her up, but I thought maybe you should know. There was a brief pause. Then Jack said, don't go alone, wait for me. I'll meet you there in 10 minutes. Jack, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm telling you. That guy was dangerous before. He'll be even more dangerous now. Wait for me. The certainty in his voice convinced her. Okay, 10 minutes. Sarah drove to the gas station with her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. When she arrived, she saw Rachel standing inside near the coffee machine, her arms wrapped around herself. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the bruises forming on her face. Jack's truck pulled in right behind Sarah's car. He got out with Max on a leash, and together they walked into the gas station. Rachel looked up when they entered. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut, and there was a cut on her lower lip. Bruises marked her neck in the unmistakable shape of handprints. Sarah's professional instincts kicked in immediately. Oh, honey, she said softly, approaching Rachel. We need to get you to a hospital. No, Rachel said, shaking her head frantically. No hospital. They'll ask questions. They'll call the police. Kevin's father used to be the sheriff. He still has friends on the force. They'll make me go back. Jack stepped forward, his expression carefully controlled, but Sarah could see the anger simmering in his eyes. Rachel, you need medical attention. Look at me. He waited until she met his gaze. I give you my word that no one will make you do anything you don't want to do, but those injuries need to be treated and documented. Documented, Rachel repeated. In case you decide to press charges later, Jack explained. Medical records can be evidence. Rachel's good eye filled with tears. I can't press charges. Kevin would kill me. Not if he's in jail, Jack said quietly. You don't understand. His family runs this town. No one will help me. Sarah put a gentle hand on Rachel's shoulder. We're helping you right now, and we're not going to stop. The gas station attendant, a young man barely out of his teens, watched the scene nervously from behind the counter. Sarah caught his eye and gave him a reassuring nod. There's a hospital in Henderson, the next town over, Jack said. 30 minutes away. We can take you there. They won't know Kevin or his family. Rachel wavered. Sarah could see the war going on inside her, the fear, the hope, the desperate desire to be safe battling against years of conditioning and terror. Okay, Rachel finally whispered, Henderson. They left the gas station with Rachel in Sarah's car and Jack following behind in his truck with Max. Sarah drove carefully, glancing over at Rachel every few minutes. The younger woman stared out the window, silent tears streaming down her bruised face. How long has this been going on? Sarah asked gently. Rachel was quiet for so long that Sarah thought she might not answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, since about 6 months after we got married. Little things at first, grabbing my arm too hard, pushing me. Then it got worse. The hitting started about 2 years ago. Why did you stay? Rachel let out a bitter laugh. That's what everyone asks, isn't it? Like it's so simple to just leave. Where would I go? My parents died in a car accident 3 years ago. I have a sister in Ohio, but we haven't spoken in years because Kevin didn't like her. He made me quit my full-time job at the library, said I only needed to work part-time, that he'd take care of me. But really, he wanted to control my money, my time, my whole life. Sarah's heart ached for this young woman who'd been so systematically isolated and trapped. I tried to leave once before, Rachel continued. About a year ago, I packed a bag and got as far as the bus station, but Kevin found me. He was so sorry, so convincing. He cried and promised he'd change. He even went to one anger management class. She laughed again, a sound filled with despair. One class. Then he said he didn't need it, that he had everything under control. And it got worse after that. Rachel nodded. He said if I ever tried to leave again, he'd find me no matter where I went, and I believed him. I still believe him. They arrived at Henderson General Hospital. Jack met them in the parking lot, and together they walked Rachel inside. The emergency room was quiet at this late hour, with only a few other patients waiting. The nurse who took Rachel's information looked at her injuries with a practiced eye that had seen too many cases like this. "Honey, we're going to take good care of you," she said kindly. "But I need to tell you that with injuries like these, we're required to call the police." Rachel started to panic, but Sarah took her hand. "It's okay, just tell them the truth." A doctor examined Rachel while Sarah and Jack waited in the lobby. Jack sat with Max at his feet, his expression thoughtful. "You're thinking something," Sarah observed. Jack looked at her. "I'm thinking that Rachel's right to be scared. If Kevin's family has that much influence in Pinewood, the local police might not be much help. So what do? We make sure this gets handled properly. There are state police, domestic violence advocates, resources beyond the town limits. Kevin might have protection in Pinewood, but that doesn't extend everywhere." An hour later, a police officer from Henderson arrived to take Rachel's statement. He was professional and kind, treating her with respect rather than suspicion. He photographed her injuries and wrote down everything she told him. "Ma'am, I can issue an emergency protective order right now," the officer said. "It'll be temporary, but it prevents your husband from contacting you or coming near you. We can also have someone from the domestic violence shelter come talk to you about your options." Rachel looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "Okay," Rachel said. "Yes, please." By the time they left the hospital, dawn was breaking over Henderson. Rachel had a protective order, a follow-up appointment scheduled, and information about a women's shelter that could provide safe housing. But she looked exhausted and overwhelmed. "Where will you go now?" Jack asked. "The shelter, I guess," Rachel said uncertainly. Sarah made a decision. "No, you're coming home with me tonight. You need rest and you need to be somewhere you feel safe. We'll figure out the next steps tomorrow." "I can't ask you to do that," Rachel protested. "You're not asking, I'm offering." Jack approved of the plan. "I'll follow you both home and do a security check of your house, Sarah, if that's okay. Make sure Kevin hasn't figured out where Rachel went." As they drove back to Pinewood in the early morning light, Sarah realized how much her quiet, simple life had just changed. She'd taken responsibility for Rachel's safety, and there was no going back now. But as they passed the sign welcoming them to Pinewood, Sarah noticed Jack's truck was no longer behind them. She checked her rearview mirror and saw him turning off onto a different road. She wondered where he was going, but trusted he had his reasons. What Sarah didn't know was that Jack was heading to Kevin Bradshaw's house. Not to confront him. Jack was too smart and too disciplined for that. But to observe, to gather information, to understand exactly what kind of threat they were dealing with. Because Jack had seen men like Kevin before, in war zones and dark places around the world. He knew that men who hurt women rarely stopped on their own. Kevin would come looking for Rachel, and when he did, Jack intended to be ready. Rachel slept most of the day in Sarah's guest room. Sarah checked on her periodically, nodding the way she flinched even in her sleep, her body still braced for violence even while unconscious. Sarah made phone calls. She contacted a lawyer friend in Henderson who specialized in family law and domestic violence cases. She called the women's shelter and spoke with an advocate who provided valuable advice and resources. She was building a support network around Rachel, one that Kevin couldn't penetrate or destroy. Jack called around 2 in the afternoon. "How's she doing?" "Sleeping. How are things on your end?" "I did some reconnaissance this morning. Kevin's truck is at his house. The neighbors say he's been home all day but angry, throwing things around inside. One neighbor said she heard him shouting on the phone." Sarah's stomach tightened. "You think he knows where Rachel is?" "Not yet, but he's looking. He called the library where she works, her few friends in town. He's trying to track her down." "The protective order only works if he follows it," Jack interrupted. "Men like Kevin don't respect pieces of paper. You need to be prepared for him to show up." Sarah looked out her window at the quiet street. Pinewood had always felt so safe. Now she saw it differently, isolated, far from help if she needed it. "What do I do if he comes here?" "You call 911 immediately. Don't open the door. Don't engage with him, and you call me. I can be at your house in under 5 minutes." "Jack, you've already done so much." "Sarah," his voice was firm, "I was a SEAL for 15 years. I've dealt with some of the most dangerous people on the planet. Kevin Bradshaw doesn't scare me. What scares me is the thought of you and Rachel facing him alone." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." After hanging up, Sarah made herself a cup of tea and sat at her kitchen table. She thought about her late husband, Tom, and what he would say about all this. Tom had always believed in standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. He taught their children to be brave and kind. Sarah knew he would approve of what she was doing. Rachel came downstairs around 4 in the afternoon. Her face was still badly bruised, but some of the fear had left her eyes, replaced by a hollow determination. "I can't hide here forever," Rachel said, sitting down across from Sarah. "Kevin won't stop looking for me, and I can't put you in danger." "You're not putting me anywhere," Sarah said firmly. "I chose to help you." "But Kevin is nothing but a bully, and bullies back down when they're confronted by someone who isn't afraid of them." Rachel shook her head. "You don't know him. He's not rational when he's angry. He doesn't think about consequences." "Then maybe it's time someone taught him about consequences." They spent the evening planning Rachel's next steps. The lawyer Sarah had contacted could meet with them tomorrow. The women's shelter had a room available if Rachel wanted it. There were options, possibilities, a path forward that didn't involve going back to Kevin. But around 8 o'clock, everything changed. Sarah's doorbell rang. Both women froze. Sarah walked to the window and carefully looked out. Kevin's truck was parked at the curb. Kevin stood on her porch, his finger pressed repeatedly on the doorbell. Even through the door, Sarah could see the rage radiating from him. "Don't answer it," Rachel whispered, her face pale with terror. Sarah pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "I need police at 47 Maple Street. A man with a protective order against him is at my door, violating that order. He's the husband of a domestic violence victim I'm sheltering." While she talked to the dispatcher, Kevin started pounding on the door. "I know she's in there," he shouted. "Rachel, get out here now." Sarah hung up with the dispatcher and immediately called Jack. He answered on the first ring. "I'm already on my way. I saw his truck drive past my place heading toward your neighborhood. Lock all your doors and windows. Stay away from them. I'll be there in 3 minutes." Kevin's pounding grew more violent. "You can't keep her from me. She's my wife. Rachel, if you don't come out here right now, you'll be sorry." Rachel was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "He's going to break in. He's going to kill us both." Sarah put her arm around the younger woman. "He's not going to touch you, I promise." There was a crash as Kevin kicked the door. The frame shuddered but held. He kicked it again. Sarah heard the sound of a truck engine roaring up the street. Jack's vehicle skidded to a stop in front of her house. Jack jumped out with Max, and Sarah watched through the window as he approached Kevin with quick, purposeful strides. "Step away from the door," Jack commanded. Kevin turned, his face twisted with rage. You, the guy from the parking lot, this is none of your business. You're violating a protective order. That makes it everyone's business. That's my wife in there. That's a woman you beat half to death, and you're not getting near her. Kevin rushed at Jack, his fist raised. It was a mistake. Jack sidestepped smoothly, caught Kevin's arm, and in a move so fast Sarah almost missed it, had Kevin face down on the lawn with his arm twisted behind his back. Max stood guard, his teeth bared, a low growl rumbling from his chest. Let me go, Kevin struggled, but Jack's hold was unbreakable. Not a chance. You're staying right here until the police arrive. As if on cue, Sarah heard sirens in the distance. The police were coming. Kevin continued to struggle and shout threats, but Jack held him effortlessly, his knee pressed into Kevin's back, his training and experience making him more than a match for the bigger man's rage. 2 police cars pulled up. Officers got out, their hands on their weapons until they assessed the situation. Officer Chen, one of them said, looking at Jack, you can let him go now, we've got this. Jack released Kevin and stood up, stepping back. Max remained alert, watching Kevin with unwavering focus. Kevin scrambled to his feet, pointing at Jack. That man assaulted me. I want him arrested. Really? Officer Chen said dryly. Because from where I'm standing, you violated a protective order, trespassed on private property, and attempted to break down a door. And this gentleman restrained you from committing further crimes. You don't understand, Kevin said, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. My wife is confused. She's been listening to these people and they've turned her against me. I just want to talk to her. You just want to hurt her, Jack said quietly, like you've been hurting her for years. Kevin's face flushed red. You don't know anything about my marriage. I know enough, Jack replied. Officer Chen pulled out his handcuffs. Kevin Bradshaw, you're under arrest for violating a protective order, trespassing, and attempted breaking and entering. Wait, Kevin said, panic replacing rage in his voice. You can't arrest me, my father. Your father retired from the sheriff's department 5 years ago, Officer Chen interrupted. And even if he hadn't, it wouldn't matter. You broke the law. As the officers handcuffed Kevin and read him his rights, he stared at Sarah's house with pure hatred in his eyes. This isn't over, he called out. Rachel, this isn't over. Jack stepped between Kevin and the house, blocking his view. Yes, he said calmly, it is. The police put Kevin in the back of their car and drove away. Jack walked up to Sarah's door and she opened it. Is everyone okay? He asked. Sarah nodded, though her hands were still shaking. Rachel stood behind her, staring at the place where Kevin had been with an expression of disbelief. He was arrested, Rachel said, as if she couldn't quite believe it. They actually arrested him. Yes, Jack said. And with witnesses and the protective order violation, they'll have to keep him overnight at least. Rachel sank into Sarah's couch, her whole body trembling with relief and delayed shock. No one's ever stood up to him before. Everyone in this town is either afraid of him or related to him or just doesn't want to get involved. Well, we're involved now, Sarah said firmly. Jack knelt down so he was at eye level with Rachel. Listen to me. Kevin will make bail probably by tomorrow. When he does, he'll be even angrier. You need to decide what you want to do. Stay in Pinewood and fight this legally, or leave town and start somewhere new. Either choice is valid. Rachel looked between Jack and Sarah, these 2 strangers who'd become her protectors. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being afraid. I want to fight. Sarah felt a surge of pride. This was the Rachel who'd been buried under years of abuse and fear. She was finding her strength. Then we'll fight, Sarah said, together. Jack stood up. I'll stay on your couch tonight, Sarah, if that's okay, just in case Kevin posts bail faster than expected. I'd feel better if you did, Sarah admitted. That night, Sarah lay in bed listening to the sounds of her house. Jack was downstairs with Max. Rachel was in the guest room. Her quiet little life had turned upside down in a matter of weeks. But strangely, Sarah didn't regret it. For the first time since Tom died, she felt like she had a purpose beyond just existing. She was making a difference in someone's life. She just hoped they were all prepared for what would come next. Kevin made bail the next morning just as Jack had predicted, but something had shifted in Pinewood. The arrest had been public. Neighbors had seen it. Word spread through the small town like wildfire. Sarah received phone calls from people she barely knew. Some were supportive, offering help and telling their own stories of Kevin's violent temper. Others were hostile, accusing her of interfering in a marriage and making trouble where there was none. But the most surprising call came from Jennifer Walsh, a woman Sarah recognized from church but had never really spoken to. "Sarah, this is Jennifer. I need to talk to you about Kevin Bradshaw." They met at Sarah's house that afternoon. Jennifer was in her 50s, well-dressed and well-spoken, a pillar of Pinewood society. Sarah couldn't imagine what she wanted. "I heard what happened," Jennifer said, sitting in Sarah's living room with a cup of coffee. "How you took Rachel in, how that young man, Jack, stood up to Kevin." "Word travels fast in a small town," Sarah said carefully. Jennifer set down her cup, her hands trembling slightly. "Kevin Bradshaw beat his first wife too. Did you know that?" Sarah sat up straighter. "No, I had no idea he'd been married before." Melissa was her name, beautiful girl from Henderson. They were married for 3 years about 10 years ago. She left him after he put her in the hospital with broken ribs and a concussion. But the Bradshaw family convinced her not to press charges, paid her off to leave town quietly and not make a fuss that might embarrass the family. "How do you know all this?" Jennifer's eyes were sad. "Because Melissa was my niece. She lives in California now, remarried to a good man, but she's never been the same. She still has nightmares." Sarah felt anger burning in her chest. So Kevin's done this before, and everyone just let him get away with it. The Bradshaw family has power in this town. Kevin's father was sheriff for 20 years. His uncle is a judge in the county court. His cousin sits on the town council. They protect their own. "Then why are you telling me this?" Jennifer looked directly at Sarah. "Because I didn't speak up for my niece when I should have. I let the family intimidate me into silence. I've regretted it every day since. I'm not making that mistake again. If Rachel is willing to press charges, I'll testify about what happened to Melissa. I'll help establish a pattern of behavior." Sarah reached across and squeezed Jennifer's hand. "Thank you." Over the next week, more people came forward. A former coworker of Kevin's who'd seen him lose his temper and punch a wall. A neighbor who'd called the police 2 years ago after hearing Rachel screaming, only to have Rachel lie to protect Kevin. A waitress from the local diner who'd seen Kevin grab Rachel's wrist so hard it left bruises. These witnesses, combined with Rachel's medical records, the photographs from the hospital, and the violation of the protective order, built a strong case. The lawyer Sarah had found, Margaret Torres, was experienced and tenacious. "The Bradshaw family will try to make this go away," Margaret warned during a meeting at her office. "They'll offer money. They'll try to intimidate you. They'll use every connection they have." "I don't care," Rachel said, and Sarah could hear the steel in her voice. This was not the terrified woman from the parking lot. "I want him to face consequences for what he did, not just to me, but to Melissa and probably other women we don't even know about." Jack attended some of these meetings, offering quiet support and practical advice. He'd become a fixture in their lives, checking on them daily, making sure they felt safe. One evening, Sarah asked him why he cared so much. They were sitting on her back porch while Max played in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Jack was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My sister was married to a man like Kevin. I was deployed overseas when it was happening. I didn't know how bad it had gotten. She tried to hide it from the family, made excuses for the bruises when we video called. Sarah's heart sank. She could already sense where this story was going. One day she decided she'd had enough. She told him she was leaving. He didn't take it well. Jack's voice was carefully controlled, but Sarah could hear the pain underneath. She didn't make it out of the house. Neighbors heard the gunshot and called police, but it was too late. "Jack, I'm so sorry. I got emergency leave and came home for the funeral. I kept thinking about all the times I'd noticed something was off but didn't push her to talk about it. All the times I could have intervened and didn't." He looked at Sarah. "I can't change what happened to my sister, but when I saw Kevin grab Rachel in that parking lot, I wasn't going to walk away. Not again." Sarah understood now. This wasn't just about helping Rachel. This was about Jack finding redemption, making peace with the guilt he carried. "Your sister would be proud of what you're doing," Sarah said gently. "I hope so." The trial date was set for 3 months away. In the meantime, Rachel stayed with Sarah, started seeing a therapist, and began the long process of healing. She filed for divorce, got a full-time job at the Henderson Library, and started rebuilding her life. Kevin's family did exactly what Margaret had predicted. They offered Rachel money to drop the charges, first $20,000, then $50,000, then $100,000. Rachel refused every offer. They tried intimidation. Kevin's uncle, the judge, had a colleague call Margaret with thinly veiled threats about her career. Someone slashed the tires on Rachel's car. Sarah received anonymous letters telling her to mind her own business. But they underestimated the support network that had formed around Rachel. Jack installed security cameras at Sarah's house. The Henderson police, who had no loyalty to the Bradshaw family, took every threat seriously. And the women who'd come forward, Jennifer and others, refused to be silenced. The breaking point came when Kevin violated the protective order again. He showed up at the Henderson Library where Rachel worked, cornering her in the parking lot after her shift. He didn't touch her. He was smarter than that. But he followed her to her car, shouting about how she was ruining his life, how he'd given her everything. How dare she betray him like this? Rachel called 911 and stood her ground, refusing to show fear. When the police arrived, Kevin claimed he was just trying to talk to his wife, that the protective order was unjust. But there were witnesses this time, library patrons who'd seen the whole thing, security camera footage. Kevin was arrested again, and this time the judge, not his uncle but a judge from another county who'd been assigned to the case, denied bail. Kevin would stay in jail until the trial. The trial itself was difficult. Rachel had to sit in a courtroom and recount the worst moments of her marriage while Kevin stared at her with cold hatred. His lawyers tried to paint her as a liar, an opportunist, someone manipulating the system for money and attention. But Margaret was brilliant. She brought witness after witness to the stand. The doctor who'd treated Rachel's injuries, the police officer who'd photographed the bruises, Jennifer Walsh, who testified about what had happened to her niece Melissa, the neighbors who'd heard fights and breaking glass. And then Jack took the stand. He described what he'd seen in the parking lot that first day, the fear in Rachel's eyes, the way Kevin had grabbed and shaken her. He spoke about the night Kevin had tried to break down Sarah's door and how he'd restrained Kevin from committing further violence. Kevin's lawyer tried to discredit Jack, suggesting he was some kind of vigilante with a hero complex. Jack remained calm and factual, his military bearing and measured responses making him an unshakable witness. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. Guilty on all counts: domestic assault, violation of protective order, attempted breaking and entering, harassment and stalking. Rachel burst into tears. Sarah hugged her tightly. Even Margaret wiped away tears of relief. At sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge gave Kevin 5 years in prison. with mandatory counseling and a permanent restraining order against Rachel upon his release. "Mr. Bradshaw," the judge said, looking at Kevin with disgust, "you used your family's position in this community to terrorize and abuse vulnerable women. You believed you were untouchable. This court is here to prove that no one is above the law." Kevin's father, sitting in the courtroom, looked like he'd aged 10 years. The Bradshaw family's reputation was shattered. Their connections couldn't save them from the truth. After the sentencing, Sarah, Rachel, Jack, and Margaret went to dinner at a restaurant in Henderson to celebrate. Rachel looked different now, still healing, still working through trauma, but stronger. There was light in her eyes again. "I can't believe it's really over," Rachel said. "This chapter is over," Margaret corrected gently. "But you've got a whole life ahead of you now, a life where you're safe and free." Rachel looked at Sarah. "I wouldn't be here without you. You took me in when I had nowhere to go. You believed me when I thought no one would." "You did the hard part," Sarah said. "You found the courage to leave and the strength to fight back." Rachel turned to Jack. "And you saved my life twice. I don't know how to thank you." Jack smiled, the first genuine, unguarded smile Sarah had seen from him. "You just did. Seeing you safe and free, that's thanks enough." 6 months later, Sarah stood in the backyard of her house, watching as Rachel laughed with friends at a barbecue. Rachel had moved to Henderson and had her own apartment now, but she visited Sarah often. They'd formed a bond that transcended the circumstances that brought them together. Jack was there too, flipping burgers on the grill with Max lying in the shade nearby. He'd become a regular part of Sarah's life. Along with a group of other veterans, he'd started a support group within Henderson. He was helping other former military personnel adjust to civilian life, using his own struggles to guide others. Jennifer Walsh was there with her niece Melissa, who'd flown in from California. Melissa and Rachel had formed their own friendship, two survivors supporting each other's healing. Margaret Torres came with her husband, along with several other women who'd heard about the case and had been inspired to leave their own abusive situations. A whole community had formed around this single act of courage in a parking lot. Sarah's children had come for the weekend too, proud of their mother for standing up and making a difference. Her son, the Marine veteran, had taken Jack aside earlier and thanked him for protecting his mother. As Sarah looked around at all these people, brought together by tragedy but forged into something beautiful through courage and solidarity, she felt her late husband Tom's presence. He would have loved this. He would have been proud. "Penny, for your thoughts." Jack appeared beside her with a glass of lemonade. "Just thinking about how much can change in a year," Sarah said. "How one moment of deciding not to look away can ripple out and affect so many lives." "You changed Rachel's life by not walking away," Jack said. "But you changed mine too." Sarah looked at him in surprise. "How?" "I came to Pinewood looking for peace and quiet, trying to run from my past. But you showed me that peace doesn't come from avoiding the hard things. It comes from facing them, from standing up even when it's scary, from being part of something bigger than yourself." "You taught me something too," Sarah admitted. "After Tom died, I thought my life was over, that I'd just exist until it was my time to go. But you showed me that it's never too late to be brave, to make a difference, to matter." They stood in comfortable silence watching the party. Rachel caught Sarah's eye and waved, her smile bright and genuine. Sarah waved back, her heart full. The story that had started with violence and fear in a parking lot had become something else entirely. It had become a story about community, courage, redemption, and hope. And it had become the story of how an unlikely group of people, a retired nurse, a former Navy SEAL, an abuse survivor, and a loyal German shepherd, had stood together against injustice and won. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the darkness they'd faced, but the light they'd created by refusing to give up on each other. As the sun set over Pinewood and the sounds of laughter filled Sarah's backyard, She knew that this was what Tom had always meant when he told their children to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. Sometimes one person's courage could inspire others to be brave. Sometimes refusing to look away could save a life. And sometimes the people you helped ended up helping you in ways you never expected. Sarah Mitchell had thought her story was ending when Tom died, but really, it had just been beginning.